The coffee shop where Vivian Anders worked smelled like burnt espresso and broken dreams, but it paid her bills while she finished her graduate degree in archival science barely. She wiped down the counter for the third time that morning, her mind elsewhere, thinking about the mountain of student loans waiting for her after graduation. The bell above the door chimed, and she looked up to see a man in an expensive charcoal suit, his dark hair slightly disheveled from the wind outside. He had sharp features, a strong jaw, and eyes that looked like they carried the weight of something heavy. "What can I get you?" Vivian asked, forcing her customer service smile into place. "Black coffee. Large." His voice was deep, controlled, but there was something about the way he held himself that suggested he was barely keeping it together. She poured the coffee and handed it to him. Their fingers brushed for just a moment, and she felt an unexpected jolt. He pulled back quickly, almost like he had felt it too, then paid and left without another word. That became his routine. Every morning at 7:15, the same man in expensive suits would come in, order black coffee, and leave. Vivian learned his name from his credit card, Yates Jefferson. She started having his order ready before he arrived, and after 2 weeks of this silent dance, he finally spoke more than 3 words to her. "You remembered," he said, his eyes meeting hers properly for the first time. "You are predictable," she replied, then immediately worried she had been too forward, but he almost smiled. "Almost. Predictable. That is something I have not been called in a long time." Over the following weeks, their morning exchanges grew longer. She learned he ran a commercial real estate empire, Jefferson Holdings. She learned he took his coffee black because he did not have time for anything complicated. She learned that, when he was stressed, he rubbed his left temple with 2 fingers. What she did not know was why someone so successful looked so haunted. 3 months into their morning routine, everything changed. Vivian arrived at work to find the coffee shop closed, a foreclosure notice plastered on the window. Her boss had disappeared overnight, owing rent and leaving all his employees jobless. She stood there in the cold morning air, staring at the notice, trying not to cry. Her rent was due in 5 days. She had maybe $200 in her bank account. Vivian. She turned to find Yates standing behind her, his own coffee cup in hand from the chain place down the street. He looked at the notice, then at her face, and something in his expression shifted. "I am sorry," he said, and he sounded like he genuinely meant it. "Not your fault," she managed, her voice thick. "I will figure something out." He was quiet for a moment, studying her. "Can I buy you breakfast? There is a diner 2 blocks away." She should have said no, she barely knew him, but something about the earnest way he asked made her nod. The diner was warm and smelled like bacon and maple syrup. They sat across from each other in a worn vinyl booth, and for the first time they actually talked. Really talked. She told him about her degree in archival science, how she wanted to work preserving historical documents and records. He listened with an intensity that made her feel like every word mattered. When she finished, he set down his coffee cup with a decisive clink. "I have a proposition," Yates said. "Jefferson Holdings recently acquired a property that includes an extensive private archive. The previous owner was a collector, documents dating back over 100 years. I need someone to catalog and preserve them. Are you interested?" Vivian stared at him. "Are you offering me a job?" "I am offering you a contract position, 6 months with the possibility of extension. The pay is competitive." He named a figure that made her eyes widen. It was more than competitive. It was life-changing. "Why?" she asked, suspicious of generosity that seemed too good to be true. "Because you are qualified, you need work, and I need someone I can trust to handle valuable documents." His eyes met hers steadily. "And because I have enjoyed our morning conversations more than I care to admit." Her heart did a strange flip in her chest. "When would I start?" "Monday, if you are available." She was very available. The archive was housed in an old mansion on the outskirts of the city that Jefferson Holdings had acquired in an estate sale. Vivian arrived Monday morning to find a sprawling Victorian building with turrets and stained glass windows. Yates met her at the door personally. "The archive is in the West Wing," he explained, leading her through hallways lined with dark wood paneling. "Most of the collection is correspondence, business records, and personal documents from the Caldwell family. They owned textile mills in the 1800s. He opened a heavy oak door and Vivian gasped. The room was enormous, lined floor to ceiling with filing cabinets, boxes, and loose papers stacked on every surface. It was chaos, but it was beautiful chaos. "This is incredible," she breathed. "This is a disaster," Yates countered, but there was warmth in his voice. "Which is why I need you." He showed her the workspace he had set up: a large desk, a computer, conservation supplies, everything she could need. As he explained the security protocols and gave her access codes, Vivian noticed something odd. He kept glancing at the boxes with an expression she could not quite read. Not just professional interest, something deeper. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He blinked as if coming back from somewhere far away. "Yes, I should let you get started. Call me if you need anything." He handed her a business card with his direct number. After he left, Vivian began the slow work of sorting and cataloging. She started with the most recent documents, working her way backward through time. The Caldwell family had been meticulous record keepers, documenting everything from business transactions to personal letters. It was in the third week that she found the first anomaly. A bundle of letters from the 1950s, addressed to someone named Margaret Caldwell. The return address made Vivian pause. Riverside Home for Children. She carefully opened the first letter, her conservation training making her movements precise despite her curiosity. The letter was from a young boy, maybe 10 years old based on the handwriting. He wrote about missing his mother, about the other children at the home, about hoping she would come back for him soon. She never had. The letters continued for years, growing more desperate, then resigned, then finally stopping altogether when the boy turned 18. The boy's name was Yates. Vivian sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She looked at the dates again, doing the math. If this was the same Yates, he would be in his early 40s now. The age seemed right. She spent the rest of the day finding every document related to Margaret Caldwell. The story emerged in fragments, pieced together from letters, legal documents, and business records. Margaret had been the youngest Caldwell daughter, rebellious and wild. She had gotten pregnant at 19 by someone her family did not approve of. They had forced her to give up the baby Yates and sent her away to Europe to recover from her scandal. She had died there 5 years later in a car accident, never having returned to claim her son. Vivian felt sick. The more she read, the clearer the picture became. The Caldwell family had essentially erased Yates from their history. There were no photos of him, no acknowledgement of his existence in any of the official family records. Just those heartbreaking letters from a little boy in an orphanage, waiting for a mother who would never come. She understood now why Yates had looked so strange when he showed her the archive. He had to have known what was in here. But why would he want someone to catalog all of this? Why not just destroy it? That evening, she called the number on his business card. He answered on the second ring. "Vivian, is something wrong?" "I need to talk to you," she said. "About the archive." There was a long pause. "I will be there in 20 minutes. He arrived in 19. She was waiting in the main room of the archive, the letters spread carefully on the desk. When he walked in and saw what she had found, he stopped in the doorway. "So you know," he said quietly. "I know Margaret Caldwell was your mother. I know you grew up in an orphanage while your family lived here in luxury." Her voice was gentle, not accusatory. "Yates, why did you buy this property? Why keep these documents?" He walked over to the desk, looking down at the letters with an unreadable expression. "I bought the entire Caldwell estate when the last of them died 2 years ago. No heirs, no family left. It all went to auction." He picked up one of the letters, his letter, written in a child's handwriting. "I spent my whole life being told I was not good enough to be a Caldwell. that my mother chose to abandon me because I was a mistake she wanted to forget. That is not what happened, Vivian said firmly. These documents show she was forced to give you up. She was practically a child herself. I know that now, but for 30 years I believed their version. He set the letter down carefully. I built Jefferson Holdings from nothing. I made myself into exactly what they said I could never be, and when I had the chance to buy their legacy, I did. But you did not destroy it, Vivian pointed out. No. He met her eyes, and for the first time since she had met him, she saw vulnerability there. Because destroying it would mean letting them win. They tried to erase me from history. I wanted the truth preserved. I wanted evidence that I existed, that my mother existed, that what they did was real. Vivian moved around the desk to stand in front of him. You hired me to make sure the truth survived. I hired you because I needed someone who would handle it with care. Someone who would see the value in these broken pieces of history. His voice dropped lower. And because every morning when I saw you, I felt a little less alone. Her breath caught. They were standing very close now, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. You are not alone, she said softly. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one hand. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Vivian, I have not let anyone close in a very long time. I do not know if I remember how. Then we will figure it out together, she whispered. When he kissed her, it felt like something clicking into place. Something that had been waiting to happen since that first morning in the coffee shop. His lips were warm and gentle, and when they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I have wanted to do that for months, he admitted. Why did you wait so long? Because I was afraid, because everyone I have ever cared about has left. His hands dropped to her waist, holding her like she might disappear. And because I knew that if I started falling for you, I would not be able to stop. Who said I wanted you to stop? She smiled and kissed him again, this time deeper, pouring all her own feelings into it. They stayed in the archive until late that night, and for the first time, Yates told someone his whole story. How he had aged out of the foster system at 18 with nothing. How he had worked construction jobs during the day and gone to community college at night. How he had slowly, painfully built his real estate business from a single rundown property he had bought with every penny he had saved. I was so angry for so long, he said, sitting on the floor with his back against a filing cabinet, Vivian nestled against his side. Angry at my mother for leaving me, angry at the Caldwells for rejecting me, angry at the world for being unfair. That anger drove me, but it also isolated me. I did not let anyone in because I did not want to risk being abandoned again. I am not going anywhere, Vivian said firmly. He tightened his arm around her. I am beginning to believe that. Over the following months, Vivian continued her work on the archive while her relationship with Yates deepened. She moved out of her cramped apartment and into a place he owned. He insisted she not pay rent. She insisted she would. They compromised on her paying a quarter of market value. She met his small circle of friends, fellow self-made entrepreneurs who had known him for years and were shocked to see him with someone. We thought he would die alone in his office, one of them joked, earning a glare from Yates and a laugh from Vivian, but it was not all easy. Yates had decades of walls built around his heart, and sometimes they came back up without warning. He would get distant, pull away when things felt too good, as if he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. One night after they had been together for 4 months, Vivian woke up to find his side of the bed empty. She found him in his home office, staring at his computer screen in the dark. Yates, he looked up, startled. Did I wake you? No, the empty bed did. She came into the office and perched on the edge of his desk. What is going on? He was quiet for a long moment. I have been offered a business deal, a very large one. It would expand Jefferson Holdings internationally, make us one of the biggest commercial real estate firms in the world. That sounds amazing, Vivian said cautiously. So why do you look miserable? Because it would require me to be in London for at least 6 months, maybe longer. He finally met her eyes. And I do not want to leave you. Her heart swelled and ached at the same time. Yates, I am not going to hold you back from your career. That is not what I am saying. He stood up, frustrated, running a hand through his hair. I am saying that for the first time in my life there is something I want more than business success, but I do not know how to want that. I do not know how to be someone who chooses personal happiness over professional achievement. Vivian slid off the desk and took his hands. What if it does not have to be a choice? What if I came with you? He stared at her. To London? Why not? The archive project is nearly complete. I could work remotely to finish it, or we could put it on hold. I have always wanted to see London. She squeezed his hands. Unless you do not want me to come, not want you? His voice was rough. Vivian, you are the best thing that has ever happened to me. But I cannot ask you to uproot your life. You are not asking, I am offering, she smiled. Besides, you do realize I am completely in love with you, right? I'm not letting you run off to another country without me. Something in his face cracked open. Say that again. Which part? The part where you said you love me. I love you, Vivian repeated, softer this time. I love you, Yates Jefferson. I love your strength and your vulnerability. I love how you turned pain into purpose. I love how you drink terrible black coffee and how you rub your temple when you are stressed. I love all of you, including the parts you think are too broken to love. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. I love you, he said into her hair. I did not think I was capable of it anymore, but I love you so much it terrifies me. Good, she said, her voice muffled against his chest. We can be terrified together. They went to London. Yates threw himself into the deal negotiations, and Vivian discovered she loved the city. She finished the archive project remotely, cataloging the final documents and creating a comprehensive digital database. When she presented the completed work to Yates, she included something extra. A separate file containing all the documents related to his mother, carefully preserved and organized. This is your history, she said, handing him the external hard drive. The real story, not the version they tried to bury. He looked at the drive, then at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. Thank you. There is something else, Vivian added. She pulled out a folder containing documents she had spent weeks tracking down. I found records of your father. Yates went very still. What? His name was James Morrison. He was a mechanic who worked at a garage the Caldwells owned. Margaret met him when she was 19, and by all accounts, they were in love. Vivian opened the folder. He tried to fight for custody of you after Margaret left. The Caldwells used their money and influence to block him at every turn. He died when you were 7 in an accident at the garage. Yates stared at the documents, his hands shaking slightly as he picked them up. There were photos of a young man with kind eyes and an easy smile. A man who looked like Yates around the jawline and the shape of his nose. I had a father who wanted me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You had 2 parents who wanted you, Vivian corrected gently. Your mother was forced to give you up, and your father was prevented from claiming you. Neither of them abandoned you by choice. He set down the papers and pulled Vivian into a fierce embrace. She felt his shoulders shake and realized he was crying, really crying, maybe for the first time in decades. She held him, running her fingers through his hair, letting him finally grieve for the family he had lost. The London deal took 8 months instead of 6, but Vivian did not mind. She found work as a consultant for several British museums, using her expertise to help with their archival collections. She and Yates explored the city together on weekends, visiting markets and museums, taking walks along the Thames, building a life together. One rainy afternoon, they were browsing a bookshop in Notting Hill when Yates suddenly said, "Marry me." Vivian looked up from the book she was holding. What? He took the book from her hands and set it aside, then took both her hands in his. I did not plan this. I do not have a ring. But I am standing here in this bookshop, watching you get excited about a first edition of something I have never heard of, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it. His eyes searched hers. Vivian Anders, will you marry me? She launched herself at him, nearly knocking over a display of poetry books. Yes, of course yes, He caught her, laughing, and kissed her while the other customers in the bookshop applauded. It was imperfect and spontaneous and absolutely perfect. They got married 3 months later in a small ceremony back in the States. Yates had no family to invite, so Vivian's parents and siblings filled both sides of the aisle. Her mother cried, her father shook Yates's hand and told him he better take care of his daughter, and her younger brother made a toast about how Vivian had finally found someone as stubborn as she was. "I spent so many years thinking I had to do everything alone," Yates said in his vows, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You taught me that letting someone in is not weakness, it is the bravest thing I have ever done. You took my broken history and helped me build a future worth having. I promise to love you, to choose you, every single day for the rest of our lives." Vivian could barely get through her own vows without crying. "You showed me that love is not about perfect people with perfect pasts. It is about choosing to be vulnerable, to trust, to build something new from broken pieces. I love every part of your story, Yates, and I cannot wait to write the next chapters together." After the wedding, they bought a house, not the Caldwell mansion, but a modern place with big windows and a home office for each of them. Vivian established her own archival consulting firm, specializing in family history preservation. Yates continued to grow Jefferson Holdings, but he worked fewer hours, made time for vacations, learned how to prioritize the life he was building with his wife. 2 years into their marriage, Vivian walked into his home office with a small, wrapped box. "I have something for you." He looked up from his laptop, smiling in that way that still made her heart flutter. "What is the occasion?" "No occasion, just something I have been working on." She handed him the box. Inside was a leather-bound book, beautifully crafted. Yates opened it carefully and found himself looking at photos and documents he had never seen before. Pictures of Margaret Caldwell as a young woman, laughing at the camera. Photos of James Morrison at his garage, covered in grease but grinning. Letters, certificates, newspaper clippings. "I have been collecting everything I could find about your parents," Vivian explained softly. "Your real family history, not the version the Caldwells tried to create. I wanted you to know them, even if you never got the chance to meet them." The last page of the book held 2 photos side by side. One was Margaret holding a baby, her face full of love and sadness. The other was James, standing outside the Riverside home for children, looking up at the windows with determination in his expression. "They both visited you," Vivian said quietly. "I found the records at the orphanage. Your mother came twice before her family sent her to Europe. Your father came every week until the Caldwells got a restraining order against him. They loved you, Yates. They fought for you as hard as they could." Yates closed the book and pulled Vivian into his lap, holding her close. "How did I get so lucky to find you? I think we found each other," she murmured against his neck. "I have something to tell you too," he said after a moment. "I have been thinking about the Caldwell mansion. The archive is complete, but the building is just sitting there. What would you think about turning it into something useful?" "Like what?" "A center for foster youth aging out of the system. Job training, housing, assistance, counseling. Everything I wished I had when I was 18. He pulled back to look at her. "I want to take that place that represents everything I was denied and turn it into something that helps others." Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "I think that is the most beautiful idea I have ever heard." They spent the next year developing the program, working with social workers and therapists to create something truly helpful. The Caldwell Center opened on Yates's 45th birthday, a full-circle moment that felt like finally closing a wound that had been open his entire life. At the opening ceremony, Yates stood in front of a room full of teenagers in foster care and told them his story. Not the sanitized version, but the real one. The fear, the anger, the loneliness, the struggle. And then how he had built a life anyway, how he had found love, how he had learned that his past did not have to define his future. "You are not broken," he told them, his voice firm. "You are not less than anyone else because of where you came from, and you are not alone." Vivian watched from the side of the room, her hand resting on her stomach, where their first child was growing. She had not told him yet, wanted to wait for the right moment. But watching him speak, seeing how far he had come from that haunted man in the coffee shop, she knew they had already given their child the most important gift. A father who understood that love was not about being perfect, but about showing up, being vulnerable, and choosing connection over isolation. That night at home, she told him about the baby. He cried again, happy tears this time, and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. "I am going to be a father," he said, wonder in his voice. "You are going to be an amazing father," Vivian corrected. "You know exactly what not to do, and more importantly, you know what really matters." Their daughter was born 8 months later, healthy and loud and absolutely perfect. They named her Margaret Rose after the grandmother she would never meet, but whose story would always be remembered. Yates held his daughter in the hospital room, this tiny person who depended on him completely, and felt something shift in his chest. All the anger he had carried for so long, all the bitterness about the family that had rejected him, seemed to dissolve. He had his own family now. He had people who chose him, who loved him, who would never abandon him. "Thank you," he whispered to Vivian, who was watching them both with exhausted, joyful eyes. "For what? For seeing me, for loving me, for giving me a family." He looked down at Margaret Rose, who was yawning and making tiny noises. "For making me believe I deserved this." "You always deserved this," Vivian said firmly. "You just needed to believe it yourself." 2 years later, their son was born, James Yates Jefferson, named after the grandfather who had fought to claim his son, and the father who had broken the cycle of abandonment. Watching Yates with their children, Vivian sometimes thought about that first morning in the coffee shop, how she had seen a haunted, lonely man and wondered what his story was. She knew now. She knew every painful detail, every scar, every wall he had built and slowly torn down. And the beautiful thing was that knowing his past, understanding where he came from and what he had survived, only made her love him more deeply. Because the secrets she had uncovered in that archive had not revealed a man who was damaged beyond repair. They had revealed a man who had survived, who had built himself into someone strong and successful despite every odd against him. A man who had learned, slowly and painfully, how to trust and love. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Vivian with a weekend trip to the coffee shop where they had first met. It had reopened under new management, and he had arranged for them to have the place to themselves for an hour. "This is where it started," he said, pulling her close as they stood at the counter where she used to work. "This is where I first saw you and thought maybe, possibly, I could let someone in. And here I was, just trying to pay my rent," Vivian teased, but her eyes were soft. "You saved my life," Yates said seriously. "Not dramatically, not all at once, but morning by morning, smile by smile, you reminded me that connection was possible, that I was not broken beyond repair." "You were never broken," Vivian said, framing his face with her hands. "You were just hurting." "There is a difference." He kissed her then, deep and slow, a kiss that held 5 years of love and trust and choosing each other every single day. When they pulled apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. "I never thought I would get to have this," he admitted quietly. "A wife who loves me, children who need me, a purpose beyond just proving I was good enough. You gave me all of that." "We gave it to each other," Vivian corrected. "You taught me that love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone who is willing to do the work, to be vulnerable, to build something real." They stood there in the empty coffee shop, holding each other, two people who had found each other at exactly the right time. Yates thought about the scared, angry boy he had been, growing up believing he was unwanted. He thought about the driven, isolated man he had become, building walls to protect a heart that had been broken too many times. And then he thought about the man he was now, a husband, a father, someone who had learned that letting people in was not a weakness but a strength. Someone who had discovered that the greatest success was not money or power, but love freely given and received. "What are you thinking about?" Vivian asked, reading the expression on his face. I am thinking that I would go through it all again, every painful moment, every lonely night, every time I felt like giving up if it meant ending up here with you. She smiled, that beautiful smile that had first caught his attention 5 years ago. Good thing you do not have to do it again. You have got me for the rest of your life. Promise, promise. They left the coffee shop hand in hand, walking out into the bright afternoon sun. Behind them was a history of pain and survival and secrets uncovered. Ahead of them was a future they were building together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of love at a time. Yates looked at his wife, thought about their children waiting at home with Vivian's sister, and realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life. Not revenge on the family that rejected him, not proof that he was good enough, not success that would fill the empty spaces inside. He had found home. He had found belonging. He had found love, and it turned out that was worth more than all the real estate empires and business deals in the world. Because at the end of the day, the most valuable thing he owned was not buildings or companies or money in the bank. It was the heart of the woman beside him, the trust of his children, and the knowledge that he was finally, truly, no longer alone. The secrets Vivian had uncovered in that dusty archive had not broken him. Instead, they had freed him from a false narrative, replaced lies with truth, and given him permission to finally let go of the anger that had driven him for so long. Her love had shown him that his past, painful as it was, had shaped him into someone capable of deep love and fierce loyalty. They drove home together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Margaret, Rose, and James would be demanding bedtime stories soon, and there would be bath time chaos and spilled juice, and all the messy, beautiful reality of family life. And Yates Jefferson, the man who had once believed he was not worthy of love, could not wait to get home to it all.